Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the How to Survive podcast.
Can you believe it?
I am Joe, and I'm joined as ever by Chris. Hello.
I'm so happy to be back talking about my favourite film franchise, Friday the 13th.
I know, it's exciting. Apologies ahead of this one. I am full of flu. So if I sound a little bit bunged up, that's why.
It's been a long spell of illness as well, isn't it?
I know,
you were poorly last week as well.
Yes, exactly it. And it seems to be getting worse.
Dear.
But, you know, you got to get worse before you get... Break eggs to make omelettes.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's hope this isn't the last How to Survive podcast.
Yeah. I mean...
Any last words you want to...
I don't know. I think if it does go bad for me,
Yeah.
And you have to replace me...
Sure.
If... make sure they're not as good looking as me. I want to leave that as my legacy.
As your epitaph.
Yes.
Sure.
Or, better yet, do like a thing they did in The Sopranos with Lydia Soprano, where she died before they could film her last scenes, so they just CGI'd her in.
Sure, yeah.
So just, do that.
Old footage of you, photos and that. Just
and clips of me saying different things.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the film.
Yeah. Exactly like that.
Yeah.
But hopefully I'll survive.
Okay.
And then I'll be able to do a podcast on how to survive having a cold.
Exactly.
But I'm in good spirits, Chris.
Sure.
I'm in fine fettle because this week is Friday the 13th, a new beginning. And we know it's the new beginning because 10 weeks ago we talked about Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Of course.
And you pointed out quite pointedly that Friday the 13th, the final chapter, means the 4th of 11 movies.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the 5th of 11.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the 6th already. But let's recap.
So does this count as a franchise reboot?
I don't think so. I think no. Well, you could maybe argue that, but we'll need to discuss it in some depth before we come to the
the How to Survive,
the eponymous How to Survive discussion.
Yeah, and obviously we are spoiler filled.
Yes.
So because this is actually the first film in the franchise since Friday the 13th 1, which has a plot point.
Yeah. Yeah, you could describe it as that. Yeah.
Just before we begin, Joe, just let me quote the New York Times review of the film, which stated, "It's worth recognising only as an artefact of our culture."
Well, they're not wrong.
Please continue.
Okay, I'm going to do an overview of the plot.
Sure.
Of this, what
it's an all-time classic.
It could be called the watershed moment for the series.
Oh yeah,
they've killed.
There
off
was
Jason.
Certainly water shedding from my eyes as I watched.
They killed off Jason at the end of the last one.
Of course,
Tommy Jarvis, the killer.
Yes,
child Tommy Jarvis.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they going to do? The new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take this seriously.
Okay.
Tommy Jarvis, Corey Feldman.
Yes, reprising his role.
Yes, he stumbles through the forest at the beginning of the film
Mm-hmm.
To the grave of Jason Voorhees. He hides in the woods as some grave robbers appear and they begin to dig up Jason, who has been buried in his mask, weirdly. Jason wakes up and kills both the grave robbers as Tommy looks on. But that's revealed to be a dream. Tommy is actually now a teenager.
Sure. And he's played by a completely different actor.
Yes. Well, they couldn't wait for Corey Feldman to age 10 years.
Yeah, or finish The Goonies.
No. And he's on his way, Chris, to Pinehurst Halfway House, a secluded residential treatment facility that caters to people with mental illness.
Sure.
He clearly has PTSD from the events of Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Perfectly reasonable.
Yes, well, his whole family were killed, and he did it. He was forced to become a murderer himself.
Of course.
So it's understandable.
Self-defense.
Have some baggage.
Sure.
At the facility, he and we meet a group of awkward teenagers, of whom more later, as well as a young boy named Reggie the Reckless, whose grandfather is the facilities manager at the house. We also meet some staff, a doctor, and a doctor's assistant, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly, we also meet Ethel Hubbard and her son, Junior.
Yes.
Local residents who have become concerned by the new facility and its residents, who they deem to be mentally dangerous.
Yeah, and she says, as far as I'm concerned, all these loonies should be killed off one by one.
Well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah. remains to be seen is a good description of the rest of the film as well.
Yes, that's correct. But her main concern is that they keep trespassing on her property.
Yes. Specifically, the two teenagers who are nymphomaniacs and a couple.
Yes, and they... I mean, if you've got two nymphomaniacs, don't put them in the same facility.
No, exactly.
But they...
With nothing to do.
They're introduced to the story by the sheriff, who's just bringing them back.
Sure.
Having caught them once again trespassing in local neighbourhoods. As Tommy begins to settle into life at Pinehurst, tragedy strikes. In broad daylight, one resident murders another with an axe and is subsequently arrested.
Sure.
The responding emergency services are a motley crew whose reaction to the murder are unusual, should we say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take this from the Wikipedia page, because I thought this was a good way to sum it up. Attending ambulance drivers Duke and Roy Burns discover the body. That's not true.
Yeah. They attend the body.
Yes. Roy is saddened by the death, but Duke believes the murder to be a harmless prank.
I mean, it's not harmless.
No.
By very definition, if you're at a murder scene, it's not a harmless prank.
No.
It's very much a harmful prank. Oh dear.
But that goes to show you...
no, well, kids will be kids, you know what I mean?
Boys will be boys.
Yeah. It's just the rough and tumble of growing up as a boy.
Exactly, yeah. But, this Roy Burns figure, he seems very troubled by it.
Sure.
We'll find out why, maybe later.
Who could say?
Yeah, one of the many plot points that will definitely be resolved by the conclusion of the film.
Yeah.
That night, two young men on their way to a party break down at the side of the road. As one begins to work on the engine, his friend heads into the woods to relieve himself. Mm-hmm. The mechanic is killed by having a flare shoved into his mouth.
Yeah.
And the returning Pua gets in the car and has his throat cut. The next morning, we begin to realise the extent of Tommy's mental illness as he begins to see the ghostly apparition of Jason around the home.
Sure.
And that's appearing behind him when he's cleaning his teeth, out in the garden. It certainly seems that he's being haunted by this wraith-like...
apparition.
Yes. What effect is that having on him? Let's find out.
Who could say?
That night, a local couple are killed as they get ready to leave for a party.
Okay.
We'll go into more detail on that one later.
Yes.
But basically, some people are killed.
Yeah.
The next day...
What? Hang on. In a Friday the 13th film, some people were killed in a scene that has no consequence to the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Are you joking?
Well, this is the reboot, Chris. We're entering a new epoch of Friday the 13th. So, the next day, Ethel has hired a farmhand to help around,
sure,
the estate. Yeah. And he's wandering through the woods, obviously shirking his responsibilities as a farmhand.
Yeah.
And he finds the two teenage nymphomaniacs having sex.
Yeah.
And begins to spy on them. Mm-hmm. He's murdered.
He's not, is he?
Yeah, he is. And then they're murdered.
Okay. Yeah.
By an unknown assailant.
Yes.
Tommy and Pam being the doctor's assistant from they take Reggie to visit his brother, who's a travelling musician, who's in town with his girlfriend Anita.
His brother is called Demon.
Yes, Demon, that's right. After a pleasant catch-up, they part company abruptly when Junior, who's the hillbilly, the son, he arrives and starts attacking Tommy, giving him grief. Tommy has a fight with him, so Pam takes Reggie back to the house, leaving Tommy behind. Minutes later, Demon and Anita are murdered.
Yeah.
Later, an upset Junior rides his motorbike around the house. It's as he's riding it in the house. He rides it in circles around the house, shouting about how the loonies have attacked him. His mother doesn't want to hear it. She's focused on making a stew.
Of course.
From nowhere, an arm swings a cleaver, and I think it decapitates.
Yeah, or just not clotheslines him basically.
Yes. Junior.
Yes.
As he rides around, and then does the same for his mother. Mm-hmm. So those well fleshed out and thoughtful characters.
I think we could talk at length about those two characters.
And we will. But Pam, who has now arrived back at the house with Reggie, tells him to go to bed, and she heads back out to find Tommy. The killer enters the house and kills all the teenagers, Chris.
He doesn't.
He does, yeah.
I can't
one by one, and
believe it.
In slightly contrived circumstances. Reggie wakes up and finds the bodies of the teenagers. Pam returns without Tommy, sees the bodies for herself, but before she can console herself or Reggie, the killer bursts in, wearing a hockey mask and the clothes of Jason Voorhees. The killer chases the pair to the barn. You won't believe it, Chris, but a Friday the 13th chase to a barn.
Yeah, can't believe it.
Just as he's about to grab Pam, he's run over by a tractor driven by the 10-year-old Reggie. After some chasing and fighting, Pam and Reggie climb into the hayloft of the barn, but before the killer can climb up, Tommy appears at the door of the barn, which is a shock, wasn't it? Because we'd all thought to this point that Tommy had to be the killer, being that he was at the scene of every murder so far, and didn't have an alibi for any of them.
No, and he was mentally damaged from the previous murder.
Clearly being influenced by the apparition of Jason.
Yes.
But that's fine. It wasn't him, after all.
No.
A protracted fight ends in the killer being thrown from the barn and impaled on a harrow. As he falls, his mask is removed, revealing that the killer was, of course, the paramedic, Roy Burns, from earlier in the film. And you recognise his face, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah.
You thought, when his...
I thought... I had a short list of potential people in my head.
Yeah.
And I've got an eidetic memory, obviously, so
Yes,
I recognised him instantly.
Yeah, it was obviously him. So that's how the film ends.
Yeah.
Except it's not. At the hospital, the sheriff explains to Pam that Roy Burns, the paramedic, was the father of the teen who was murdered at the beginning of the film.
Sure.
By his friend at the camp. I say camp, at the mental wellness facility. So Pam goes down to Tommy's bedroom to check on him because he's unconscious, I guess, or sleeping.
Yeah.
And when she goes in there, she is murdered from behind by Jason Voorhees. But that turned out to be a dream.
Yes.
Tommy wakes up, and now the real Pam in real life walks towards him, and he goes to his drawer in his hospital room and takes out his Jason Voorhees mask and clothes, puts them on, and the last shot is him apparently about to kill Pam. So, Chris, that's fine. That was all fine.
Yeah.
Happy with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm delighted with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good film?
Well, it's a departure for the series, isn't it? Given that it isn't set in the direct vicinity of Crystal Lake.
No, exactly.
And it takes place a number of years after the events of the first film, rather than within the same 96 hours.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't know if I'm just predisposed to hate every film in this franchise because I've disliked all of the rest of the films, or if they genuinely are getting worse and worse.
I think this has been the worst because of the reliance on... Like, normally, I get annoyed when a film's mythology is, like, so paramount to it.
Sure.
So if you watch, like, Paranormal Activity, I've only seen the first one, but I'm going to assume that by 4 or 5...
Yeah, they all loop back on themselves.
Exactly, so it's like the character from the first film. Saw would be a better example.
Yeah.
So Saw 7 or 8 or whatever it is.
They all happen on top of each other.
Yeah, and the victim of the first film becomes the killer of the last film.
Sure.
But you need to have seen all of them for it to make sense.
Yeah.
And that annoys me when... But this one, it's just an insult.
Yeah.
I'd rather it was Jason.
Because it doesn't have any correlation.
There's no motive. There's no motive.
Well, I disagree, because actually Roy Burns is only the second. It's only the second time in the franchise that the killer actually has a motive, because...
Yeah, but he doesn't have a motive, Chris. It doesn't make sense.
Well, no. Okay. So he ostensibly has a motive, and that motive is that he's upset because his son has been murdered.
Yes.
And so he's going to murder all the teenagers at the house because he's gone mad or whatever.
I understand that, and I'm with you on that part. However, why does he kill everyone else?
That is the problem. Yeah. He has no reason to kill the people in the car. He has no reason to kill... I mean, he has no reason to kill anyone other than the single person who
is responsible for his son's
because
death.
It's not like, at least in the first film, Mrs. Pamela Voorhees was annoyed because it was the negligence of the teenagers that caused her son's death. Whereas this one, it's the actions of one man who is... who that has led to his son's death. You could say potentially that the owners of the operation are the ones who are ultimately responsible because they should have been supervising. I mean, like, why would you have someone who's clearly clearly angry and violent to the point of murdering someone
Right.
at the slightest provocation, why you would have them in anywhere that wasn't a specialist care unit,
Yes, exactly.
or anywhere where they have access to an axe for day-to-day activities. I don't know. It's not a very well thought out idea.
No.
I would say.
But that's kind of a symptom of the film, I think.
I think it's fair to say, it's not unfair to say that the whole film is poorly thought out.
In all of its substance, it is probably the worst film I've ever seen.
So, while we're on the subject,
Actually, no, I still think the Nightmare on Elm Street remake is the worst film ever.
okay.
This is just shit. It's a shit film.
So, while we're on that topic, let's talk about the hillbilly characters.
Okay.
I think they're the worst characters in any film that I've ever seen, by some distance.
Do you think so?
Yeah, like I think I text you saying that they were like a bad Saturday Night Live, or I may have tweeted it actually from the How to Survive account, that they were a bad Saturday Night Live sketch level.
They're like Nickelodeon sketch show.
Yeah, they're genuinely terrible. I mean, they're like, they're, in broad strokes, they're offensive to anyone who lives in any rural environment any area of America.
I can see what they've obviously watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I thought, you know what would be really good if we had some like hillbilly horror element to this film, so that maybe we might suspect them as being the killers. But the thing is, every scene they're in, they're so.
Yeah,
they're just unbelievable as a threat, really.
Yeah, they're just terrible. They're just nothing characters, aren't they? Yeah. They have no purpose. Like all of these series, all the films in this series have all these scenes and characters and events that are like closed loops, which are just so annoying to watch because they're like. They're set up and then it's like, the ultimate is that hitchhiker in, I think, part 3, is it? Or part 4?
One of them, yeah.
Where the hitchhiker is by the side of the road and she doesn't interact with any of the characters, basically, and then she dies, and then the scene's over and it has no impact on the rest of the film. And it's like a closed loop of like nonsense, basically.
Like you could take each of the murders, remove them from the film, and it would have absolutely no bearing on the rest of the film.
No.
Like, every single one. Every single scene in this film is isolated from the rest of it.
It's just such a nothing film.
Yeah.
It's not scary or funny or interesting or anything. None of the characters is engaging remotely. There's nothing original or exciting or ingenious about any element of the film, like the murders or like there's no clever lines or payoffs or anything like that, or any of the story events or any of the characters or the way that it was made. Like, I mean, like if you're watching a slasher film and even the deaths are just pedestrian, like a person walks. Like there's the character who the character who fancies the girl, they're sitting on the sofa, they're watching a film together, and
he asks her out, basically.
and she says no, and then he goes up to seek solace from the sort of rock
Gothic
chick, and she sort of tells him to get out, and then so he goes, oh, okay, and walks out of the room, and then he just dies. And it's like every murder that's like that in this franchise, it just frustrates me so much because it's so pointless. Like there's no build-up intention. It's just he turns around and there's, a man who stabs him or cuts his head off or cuts his throat or pokes his eyes out or whatever. Like, and like that would be affecting if you cared about the characters like even a little bit, but you don't, obviously, because they're all terrible. They're all just two-dimensional.
Let's talk about the characters, Chris.
Okay,
I glossed over them in the intro.
Sure,
but I'll go into a little more detail now. I'll give you their entire, summary of their who they are.
Please.
We've got Violet, who we mentioned is goth.
Okay.
We've got Jake, who is awkward guy.
Is he the one who asks out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Robin is laughing at awkward guy.
Okay.
We've got Vic, who is the middle-aged Axeman.
Yes. Okay. The anger management guy.
Yes. Yeah. Joey is fat guy.
Okay.
Eddie is sex guy.
Okay.
And Tina is sex girl.
Sure.
That's the plethora of in-depth characters we got in Friday the 13th New Beginning.
Well, let's not forget Diner Man and Diner Woman.
Well, they do have names. I've neglected to write them down.
Okay.
And I think his name was Pete.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
Her name was Lana. I remember now.
Okay, it's embedded in your conscience.
You mean, Chris? Are you saying that the scene where she is getting ready and she looks in the mirror with her top off and says, "It's showtime"? Are you really saying that that's not in your favourite movie moments?
Yes,
ever?
I have to say. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite snuck in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just like I don't think I've ever regretted something so much in life than deciding to do every film in this series, in this podcast.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's got to the point where it's a bit of a chore.
It's just a total chore.
Yeah.
If the definition of a chore is doing something that you don't want to do because you have to.
Yes.
This is a literal chore.
But I don't know. There's some fun stuff to be had here. Surely. Let's have a look. Here's a point. We just discussed the motive just now.
Yeah.
And all right, I'll grant you that it does make sense if you say.
Well, it makes sense for him to kill either the one person who did it or
the institution
who
allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
The other murders don't make sense unless you argue that perhaps seeing his son dead tipped him over the edge and he just wanted to kill everyone.
Yeah.
Right? So when we actually get told who the guy was, because we didn't recognise him, let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading through the trivia and stuff for the film.
Sure.
And apparently, when shooting it, everyone involved, including the character Roy Burns, the actor, including the director, including all the producers, everyone knew no one was going to recognise who that was, and they had to shoot it anyway because they basically built the whole film around it. And they had the realisation, they were like, this is going to be rubbish.
Right.
And they were right, it was rubbish. And the only explanation we get is by the sheriff who tells Pam. But that turns out to be in a dream sequence, you recall.
Right.
So
yeah.
So is it canon?
This is another line of Friday the 13th confusing dream sequences where, is it canon? You have to assume so, but it's just poorly thought out in terms of the film. Yes.
So we could rewrite our own motive and say we could assume he was doing it because he really was a maniac who wanted to kill people for some other reason.
Yeah.
The fact that he is the guy's son is a dream of Tommy Jarvis.
Yeah.
Tommy Jarvis, by the way, has 24 lines in the whole film. So he speaks 24 words in the whole film.
24 words?
Yeah, not 24 lines,
the main
24
character.
words. Yeah, the protagonist.
So he's played by John Shepherd,
right?
Who is the least convincing looking teenager I've ever seen.
Well, they all are, aren't they?
He looks... He's 25 when the film is made, which isn't, outside of the realms of possibility. But it's just like, I don't know if it's just the way he carries himself. Like it.
Yeah, he's obviously a man.
Yeah, exactly.
Same as the guy who was chopping wood.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's like had to shave during his scene because he his beard had grown so much.
Yeah. It's just a bad film. I mean, like, it's almost like it's not worth getting too angry about it. But the problem is that we have to watch them. And that's what makes me angry.
Well, I don't mind it too much, Chris. We're doing it for the listeners. We're not doing it for us.
Yeah.
We're not doing it for us. Here's some stats. Body count, 22.
Mm-hmm.
3 of those were in dreams, so whether they count or not, we don't know.
Okay. And also, this is the highest body count of the franchise, I believe.
Yes, I think they try and do more in each one. More breasts. In any other film. So that's good, isn't it? That's what we tune in for. This is the first time Jason Voorhees' full name has been used.
Really?
Yes. They've either referred to him as Jason.
Okay.
Or in Friday the 13th Part 3, they didn't even mention him by name at all.
Oh dear. Well, because they didn't know who he was.
Yeah, exactly. Which makes the whole thing just that much more suspicious.
Yeah.
The only people who talk about him by name in this film, I think, are the mayor of the town.
Yeah.
Who tells the police chief, the police chief has a suspicion that Jason Voorhees is back.
Yeah.
The Jason Voorhees who is dead.
Yeah.
Right? And the sheriff of the town says, no, I think he's back from the dead. On what evidence? I don't know. No one's seen a masked killer.
So Roy Burns, who is the eventual killer,
he...
I mean, we always do, what do we know about Jason from the film? But obviously Jason isn't actually in this film.
Or is he?
Well, he's not. He's not, because it is Roy Burns. It's definitively Roy Burns.
Yes, correct.
But what do we know about Roy Burns? Because he So he's got a son.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't anymore. His son's
Yeah,
dead.
yeah. So his son's dead, and he presumably is doing it either for revenge or because he's gone mad, right? Doing these murders.
But we don't know for sure that's the case because it was told to us in a dream.
Told to us in a dream. Okay, but he is obviously he has enough intelligence to dress and behave as Jason Voorhees,
yes,
which he presumably has researched when he found out that Tommy Jarvis was coming to town. You know, Tommy Jarvis is being, taken to this hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so, who's Tommy Jarvis? He's the person who killed Jason Voorhees. Who's Jason Voorhees? Let me look it up. Oh, he's this big, giant, masked man who went around murdering people with axes and blunt instruments and all that sort of thing. So, he's taking the MO. He's a copycat killer, basically, isn't he? Because he's trying to convince everyone that it was Jason.
Right, okay.
Or Tommy as Jason, presumably.
Yes, that's probably true.
So
I thought it was Tommy.
Yeah. So he has some intelligence, and another sign that he has intelligence, obviously, other than the fact that he's a human being who has a job and drives around and all that sort of thing, is that in the scene where the two teenagers in the car are killed, he holds a flare up, knowing that the blinding light will stop him from being seen. You know, he knows. Which, as I was watching this film. I was making notes as I do, and I had written that down as a sign that Jason had intelligence, because I thought obviously that it was going to be Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
And that was going to be, look, they've gone back. The pendulum has swung back towards Jason is intelligent again. Yeah. But it turns out that it's Roy Burns. Interestingly, as well, as I said earlier, this is the first plot twist. In the franchise since the first one, okay, and since
it was supposed to be Mrs. Voorhees,
which we agree is the best film as well, right? As in the
best film ever.
the first of the franchise was the best. That was the high point of the franchise. So, as I said, I was making notes during the film, and I accidentally managed to spoil the plot twist, the first plot twist that we've had in 4 films, and I managed to spoil it for myself because I was jotting down the name of the actors, and the actor who plays Roy Burns is credited as Roy Burns / Jason Voorhees.
Oh no!
So. 4 films of just no plot whatsoever, and even this one tiny little aftershock of plot. I accidentally ruined it for myself.
Wow, have you done it for the next film yet?
No, I do know the intro of the next film.
I assume it's Jason climbing out of a grave.
You are not far wrong.
Yeah,
and we'll leave it there for the next 10 weeks. If anyone follows us on Twitter, it's at HowToSurvivePod.
Yeah.
I posted a screenshot of me telling you that we had to watch a Friday the 13th film.
Oh, yeah.
And I think your response was, "Oh, fucking hell, is it that time again?"
Yeah. I thought we had more time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is it's a heavy burden to carry.
It is a burden. That's exactly the word I was going to use.
Yeah. But it's quite nice. I don't know. I watch it myself.
It's a body of work.
So again, the killer can't possibly be strong enough to throw a human body through a window.
No, let's just check in on that.
Yep.
Yeah, that is by this point surely an intentional franchise trope. They go, oh well, it wouldn't be a Friday the 13th film without someone being thrown through a window.
Yes,
because it happens literally every time.
It does. So the fat guy axe attack,
sure,
as it will be known in
lore.
Yeah, that was probably the worst scene of the film.
Right, okay.
Because it doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Because why did he do it?
It was because...
He was annoying him, right?
It was because he got chocolate on him. Is that right? Melted chocolate.
Was it? I thought it was just because he was just annoying.
Yeah,
but he's talking to him.
He gives him a melted chocolate bar or something, doesn't he?
And then he puts the chocolate bar on the piece of wood and says, "Here, I'll leave this for you." Yeah. And he flies into a red mist and smashes the chocolate bar with an axe.
Yeah, but then it gets chocolate on him. Is that right?
I can't remember. Do you know what? I can't remember, Chris. And I only watched it a few days ago.
Okay.
And it's... I just hate it.
So you've been more you've been more leveled at it than I have so far in this podcast.
I think it's just that scene.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of the I've taken on the role of apologist for this film.
Yeah.
And I can't circumvent what is essentially a brainless scene.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent, I think, of your hitchhiker scene.
Right.
You've got a particular bugbear.
Sure. Yeah.
This is similar to, because it just comes from nowhere. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And the only reason it's there, right, as it turns out, is to introduce the character of Roy Burns, who turns out to be the killer.
Yeah.
Because he's a paramedic.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many other ways you could have done that.
Yeah. It's not.
Imagine this, for argument's sake.
Okay.
That the paramedic, when he got there, instead of it being his son, was like, oh, do you know what? This reminds me of Jason Voorhees. I love that story. Do you know what? I'm a big fan of Jason Voorhees murders.
Yeah, he's excited to meet Tommy Jarvis.
Yeah, Tommy Jarvis, you're the one who killed Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
Oh my god, what was he like? And you go, oh, that guy's really weird. And Tommy, it makes him uncomfortable. And he's like, oh, it sets off maybe a panic attack. And he's like, oh. And then the question is, oh, has that triggered Tommy Jarvis to turn into Jason Voorhees?
Yeah.
Seeing the murder. And
or is it this, copycat fan?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's two potential killers. As it is, you don't get either of that. You just get a murder, which is given as a matter of fact, someone is dead now. And
yeah.
Now I'm not a screenwriter, but I feel like that would have been a good way to save it.
Save it, you reckon? I would argue that it's probably beyond help. Well, I mean, it's like let's take a scene from later on in the film as an example. I mean, we've all been there, Joe. You're sitting on the toilet, and your partner is just outside, and you're having a sing along.
Yeah, you sing. Yeah,
just singing along,
having a sing.
Like in many ways, this is the most tragic of any death in the franchise because they both died doing what they loved.
Yeah, having shit and singing.
Yeah, this is of course Demon and Anita.
Yeah.
What is that scene? Like what is going on? Because it's I've said before in of films in this franchise, no one in the film behaves like any human being that I've ever met. Like they don't seem to have any relation to like real life human behavior.
No.
If an alien's only reference point of humanity, there's a massive apocalypse, and the only thing that survives is the Friday the 13th franchise, and that's the only reference point they have for how humanity behaved. Like the hillbilly characters, they're going like, "Will you come here and eat this slop that I made? Oh yeah, Mom, it's the best slop you ever made. Oh, you're gonna try." He's riding around in the motorbike in circles in anger. He's riding around in circles in anger, screaming, "They hit me, Mom! They hit me!" And she's going, "Will you get off that thing and come inside?" So, and then we come to Demon and Anita. And Demon is sat. I mean, he lives out of his van as well. There's one thing. And he's sat in the toilet in their in the outhouse at wherever they are. Yeah. And
in a camping site.
They're singing through I mean, we've all met couples who are joined at the hip. Yeah, they're too close. But why does she not? If I was with my girlfriend and we lived in a van or we were camping or whatever, and I was like, I just need to go to the toilet quickly. I wouldn't expect her to go, all right, I'll come with you. Well, do you need to go? No. I think
the reason she's there is because she wanted to play a prank on him.
It's just shaking the walls.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But
which is good if you're a character in a slasher film.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a useful skill.
Yeah.
But it's just
You've never done it? You've never had a sing-along when you've ever played?
No, I don't think I have. Have you?
Not
with
not
specifically with your girlfriend?
No. No, with no one ever. I mean, in fact, I think I'd say if she started singing, I'd say, look, I'm happy to sing along with us. Let me finish up here.
This is putting me off.
Yeah, he's gonna, as a courtesy, can you give me a bit of privacy when I'm having a shit? You know what I mean?
a weird situation, basically. And like I said, I just
worry. And it came on quickly, so that's not going to be a comfortable poo. Like, you know, if imagine this, right? You've had food poisoning before.
Of course.
It's unpleasant.
Yeah.
Could you muster the energy, the cognitive faculties to sing with someone when you were having food poisoning?
I don't think it was food poisoning as much as a sudden build-up of gas that he was relieved to let out.
Because it was the result of eating enchiladas.
Yes, yeah. But I think that's more gas related than it is necessarily. You know, he's got food poisoning.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how long it's been since he had the enchiladas, because as we know, it takes sort of like between 2 and 5 hours. I think.
Well, he was eating them with Reggie.
Yeah, so it's too soon for it to be food poisoning, really. But you can get sort of, you know, deferred, intestinal gas and things like that from food that's still working its way through your system.
Yes.
So it could be the enchiladas are responsible for him needing the toilet. But
so maybe he had a fajita for lunch. That's still going, and then he eats enchilada and it sets off a bit of a chain reaction.
Yeah, like his body is telling him, okay, like I see what you've done here.
Yeah.
We're gonna need to clear the decks.
Yeah, exactly. Make space.
Yeah.
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 Fair enough.
The gastrointestinal distress that he's under is undoubtedly makes his final moments all the more unpleasant.
Yeah, all the more tragic that he should be mocked when he's just trying to have a poo.
No one likes to be mocked for having a poo.
If you were going, oh, do you know what? I feel rough after eating that. I'm just gonna go have a quick toilet break, and your girlfriend was there bothering you and making fun of you and trying to see, you'd be like, Jesus Christ, give me a break.
Yeah, like, why are you doing this? Because this is really uncomfortable for me. And you're supposed to be my partner.
Exactly. Yeah. But here's one question for you, and I want to take this back to the idea of the sort of internal mythology of a franchise.
Sure.
Reggie, the character of Reggie, do you care about him? He's probably the best actor we've had in this series so far.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I don't care about him.
The most charismatic.
It's hard to care about him, isn't it? Like, because also, like, the fact that he's so young means that he's, like, you just know that he's vulnerable. Well, no, I was going to say he's got sort of plot armor,
right?
And I knew that he wasn't going to die.
True. Do you care about? Like, I did care about his relationship with his grandfather. I thought, I hope his grandfather doesn't die.
Yeah, it did.
But then they're like, oh, his brother is in town, who is a travelling musician, and he's going to be go and visit him, and then he'll be killed. I don't care. Why write him in? Why write that character in?
It's a closed loop, as I was saying. Like another character who exists in order to die.
Like Reggie's enthusiasm to see his brother is a film in itself. Yeah. Right. If it was a movie about Reggie and his grandfather who are living together for whatever reason, maybe his parents are dead, maybe all he's got left in his terms of his genealogy and his history.
His grandfather and his brother.
Yeah, and his brother, he's a distant relationship, but they're very close. He's off travelling, trying to make some money. He comes back into town. He goes to visit him, and they have a lovely time. And the tragedy of it is, it turns out that his brother is murdered shortly afterwards. So that's another link to his past, which has been taken away from him.
Yeah. Do you think that Danny Steinman doesn't communicate that effectively enough?
I don't think he communicates anything particularly well.
No.
At all.
Well, on that note, let's talk about the ending, in which Tommy decides to embody Jason and presumably kills Pam. So is it trying to suggest that the self-defense killing of Jason awakened a latent urge for murder in Tommy that perhaps is present in all of us?
Well, I think maybe the consistent appearance of Jason as a ghostly apparition seems to be an influencing factor on Tommy. So by that I mean the suggestion, for me at least, was that that's his calling in life, and he's constantly reminded that you are, in a sense, destined to become Jason.
Yeah.
And that's something he's just trying to get away from. And he's been running away from it, and he's finally decided, you know what? I may as well just give in to fate. I am now Jason.
Yeah.
And he dons the mask, which is fine. That's in his hospital room. I take it that's Roy Burns' costume. The murderer. That they often put the victim of an attacker's clothes in the hospital room of the victim.
Right.
Yeah. Don't they?
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, is it just another hockey mask that he's got, or is it specific?
Maybe. I think in this film we see several hockey masks.
That's true. I'm not convinced that many attempted murder victims become murderers.
No.
But then again, the series freely abandons any plot lines that it sets up on an almost constant basis.
Well, it made sense if...
So he probably won't be the new Jason anyway.
Well, Tommy, no.
Yeah. Even though the last two films' endings have set that up.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Yeah, but he won't be.
But because it makes sense, it won't...
No,
yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Chris, I don't know if there's ever been a film more worthy of our cognitive effort and reasoning capabilities than Friday the 13th, A New Beginning.
Sure.
And for that reason, the time has come to ask, how would you survive if you found yourself as a character in this film?
Well, as we've said earlier on in the podcast, all the victims in this film are almost universally murdered from off-screen and with no warning. So it's very hard to suggest any ways for them to survive that aren't, tautologists, basically.
Yeah.
But I'll say them anyway. So don't aggravate someone you know to have severe anger management issues when they hold an axe.
Yes.
Ensure your car is in top condition at all times.
Yeah.
Don't go into any secluded, wooded or rural areas at night or during the day.
Yes.
Don't walk around your house or place of work or any building during the hours of darkness.
Fair enough.
Don't assume that anyone entering the room you're in is the person you're expecting without visual confirmation.
Sure.
That's basically it.
Yep.
If you follow those bits of advice, Jason Voorhees can't get near you.
Or indeed Roy Burns.
But yeah, it's very difficult to offer any cogent advice because they're all brainless.
Yes.
And just nothing people.
Yes, correct.
They have no faculties with which they can administer this advice.
Well, there's one basic bit of advice, and this is, I don't know if, like you say, is the murders are instantaneous and off-screen. From off-screen.
Sure.
But here's one thing. I noticed that the murderer very obviously was not Tommy, because he was about 6'7",
yeah,
bald, and had ears on the side of his head.
Yeah. Okay.
That doesn't make sense because all of our ears are on the side of our head.
Sticking out ears, do you mean?
He had very sticky out ears.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And Tommy Jarvis doesn't have those things, and neither does Roy Burns. And here's a point, right? And this isn't how to survive, it's just an obvious point. Tommy is an expert mask maker. He's obviously capable of making a mask that makes him look like Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
Why didn't they do it?
Well, yeah, but Roy Burns was wearing a sort of prosthetic mask.
Why didn't they do it?
But
he's not a prosthetics expert.
No, I know, but so did he buy... He bought, presumably, a bald man's head? Rubber head?
But he's not 6'7", is he? Roy Burns.
I don't know.
He's not.
Okay, alright.
He's not noticeably taller than everyone else.
No, okay, alright.
And he's not built like a shithouse. He's not capable of throwing someone through a window.
No, well, as we know that no. And he also let's not forget he also crushes a man's skull with his bare hands. Which back in the heady days when it was Jason Voorhees committing all these murders.
Yeah,
that was at least explained by the fact that he was a supernatural presence, as we established. But Roy Burns, to our knowledge, has no supernatural capabilities.
No, exactly. I don't have any advice for these people, basically.
I've got a bit of advice, which is for the owners and operators of the mental health care unit.
Yeah.
If you're setting up a specialist mental health care unit, which they obviously are because they cater exclusively to teenagers with poor peripheral vision and situational awareness, then why not specialise it to the extent that you exclude frequently violent individuals who are a danger to themselves or to others?
Yes, exactly.
I realise that the owners of the care centre would likely want to have it open to as many, people, and they'd want to think the best of all the people that are coming in because that's part of their duty of care. They want
perhaps better to err on the side of caution.
Yeah, exactly. Assume the worst, in terms of from a health and safety perspective, and in this respect, the Pinehurst halfway house as it's known, is not really following its duty of care to the people
in it.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair enough. And I guess just thorough checks.
Yeah. Well, Joey Burns gets killed. If Joey Burns doesn't get killed, Roy Burns wouldn't have gone on to kill all those other people for revenge.
Exactly. Here's some questions. Here's some potential questions to ask if you're arriving at Pinehurst. All right, Chris.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
How are you feeling?
I'm okay. I'm a little bit angry.
Are you?
Yeah.
Have you had any bouts of anger lately?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Violent?
Yeah.
What do you do for fun, Chris?
I like chopping wood.
Yeah.
I like sort of trimming hedges.
Okay, gardening stuff.
Yeah, like, sort of anything that involves a large, heavy, bladed object.
Okay, and I want you to answer this honestly. I don't want you to sort of patronise you or anything.
Sure.
If we were to let you go around these sort of heavy objects, these sharp weapons, do you think that would be a dangerous thing for you to be in?
What are you trying to insinuate?
I'm not insinuating anything so much.
I can't believe that you're coming.
Or alternatively, well, hi Chris.
Hi.
Welcome to Pinehurst.
Thanks very much.
Quick question for you: do you have any sort of hallucinations?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Can you go into some detail?
I frequently see the spectral figure of the man that I killed in self-defense when he murdered my entire family, other than my sister.
How often?
I would say several times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you seeing him now?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you feel about that?
It makes me anxious. It makes me uncomfortable. And I'm sort of starting to think in the back of my mind that maybe it would just be easier if I just became him.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to recommend you for a further psychiatric evaluation.
Okay. Thanks very much. There you go. Duty of care.
Yes.
And yeah, there you go.
Okay. One final thought. If you want to set up a mental health facility on a former agricultural workspace, make sure you cover the harrow with something safe and don't leave it next to an open barn door.
That's very true. Yeah. Poor old Roy Burns.
Yeah. What a way to go. Now, you may recall, Chris, at the end of the last few episodes of How to Survive Friday the 13th franchise, we have had predictions,
of course,
about what we think would happen
sure.
the next one. So your predictions for this film were that Tommy will be the protagonist for 2 films.
Yes.
So that's half a point for that, because
okay.
Arguably he's the protagonist of this one, because he...
Well, surely that's... Yeah, okay.
He's the focus of the plot to some extent. He's the most protagonistic, shall we say. Yeah. You said there would be an attempt at better character development, that Tommy's friends will be the other characters, and that they will be more fleshed out.
I'd say that's a half a point, because there is an attempt at character development through the part of Tommy. We have a flashback / dream sequence, and we have subjective viewpoint hallucinations, which we don't see at any other point during the franchise. And they are there with a view to giving you an insight into his character. True.
And the character of Robin, would you say she's fleshed out? She's the one who gets murdered in her bedroom. She gets in bed with a corpse.
No, I would not say this.
You said that someone would go looking in a dark area, either for someone or investigating a noise. They would be surprised and then murdered. I think that did happen, so a full point for that.
Okay.
Well done. Now, my predictions.
Sure.
Firstly, a police officer will be killed.
Yes, that's...
absent from this film.
Okay.
In fact, the second film in a row where a health professional has been killed, because Roy Burns was a paramedic.
Yes. That's very true.
I said a body would be thrown through a window. The low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I said that someone will wear a hockey mask.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think, actually, Chris, I should get 3 points for that, because we see 3 people wearing hockey masks.
Okay.
You've got Jason in the dream.
Well, that's you. You've won the challenge.
Roy Burns and Tommy Jarvis at the end.
Of course.
So 3. And I said that we'll see naked breasts.
Okay.
And again, 3 points to me, because we see
3 breasts.
Yeah, we see 6 breasts, so 6 points to me.
No, but you said naked breasts.
All right, so plural.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then 1 point for that because you didn't specify how. You didn't specify set.
We will see one set of breasts.
Yeah. So you get 1 point.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So you were saying that you wore a heart rate monitor.
Yes.
While you're watching this film.
Yeah, it's a project I'm working on as part of the How to Survive wider output.
Wider reading.
Yeah. I'm going to wear a heart rate monitor for each scary film we watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only one I've done so far, but it was interesting reading. It made for interesting reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any peaks or troughs?
There were.
Particularly?
There were. Yeah.
What were they?
It's
were they so if I'm just in my head scrubbing through the chemo, so when the axe murder happens,
no,
the boys in the car get
no.
murdered.
It was pretty much static.
Okay.
Resting rate.
Yeah.
It's pretty much static. Resting heart rate. And there was one spike.
Yeah.
When Robin, the character we just mentioned, got her breasts out.
Okay.
And it spiked to about 95.
Okay.
And then immediately collapsed back down to below resting.
Okay.
So that is, I don't know what does that tell you? I don't know.
And there were no other peaks.
No. Well, there were some
ripples, but not.
But nothing. That was what I'd call the spike.
Okay. Okay.
Wow. I'll make this available eventually on the How to Survive website so you can see for yourself.
Thanks very much.
So yeah, I'm only human, Chris. You know, red-blooded man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's make some predictions for the next film.
Okay.
Because it's good to have something to look forward to, isn't it? I'll go first. I predict that we will return to a lakeside situation.
Okay. I predict that a man or woman will have their skull crushed.
Right. I predict that 2 couples will have sex.
Okay. Specifically 2, so if 3 have sex,
right? There's no point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I predict that there will be a nerdy character who is pursuing another member of the group, girl.
Okay. I predict that we will have more breasts than in any previous movie.
Okay, upping the boob count.
Yes.
I predict to reflect that. I will predict that there'll be more deaths in this film than any of the others.
Okay. Well, that seems like a fair enough prediction on your part.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to finding out whether we're right when we tune in for Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. I wonder what happened, Chris. I think Jason's going to come back.
I think he might, yeah. And before that episode, because that will be episode 51.
Wow.
We are doing something very special for episode 50. So what we're going to do is on episode 50, we're going to have the inaugural How to Survive Survivors Hall of Fame episode. So every 50 episodes, we will be focusing on this, and one survivor from the films we've covered in the previous 49 episodes will enter the hall to forever be venerated for their ability to survive.
Yes.
So start emailing in your suggestions for your favourite survivors to howtosurviveshow@gmail.com. We've got a few ground rules.
Mm-hmm.
They must be from the films we've covered from episodes 1 to 49.
Yes.
So no, if you want to do Tommy Jarvis from Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, you can't have him. But you can have him from Friday the 13th, A New Beginning.
They have to survive, importantly.
They must survive the end of the film. If they die in a later entry in the franchise, that's fine.
Yes.
They must have displayed a particular aptitude for survival themselves. For example, they must have survived as a result of their own actions rather than the actions of another. So, for example, you can't have Jones the cat from Alien because he was rescued by Ripley, but you could have Ellen Ripley.
Yes.
And that might be a good option for you to pick.
Yes.
So please email in your suggestions. We'll cover them, and one of the survivors from the last 49 films will go into the Hall of Fame. So you've got a long run up to do it. We're going to be plugging it each week to make sure you remember. So make sure you get in touch. Email in your suggestions. HowToSurviveShow@gmail.com.
We'll even accept suggestions on Twitter.
Yes.
That's @HowToSurvivePod. So just get in touch.
And if you're looking for a reminder of the films we've covered, then go to our YouTube page where you can find our entire back catalogue in an easily browsable format.
Mm-hmm. The same applies to iTunes.
Of course.
If you are using that. And if you are using that, then do leave us a 5-star review of what you thought of the show. Who's your front runner off the top of your head for Best Survivor?
As you remember, I particularly like the main character from You're Next.
Yes, I do.
But I will be going back over with a fine-tooth comb all the films that we've covered.
And you have to be able to defend it against my intense scrutiny.
Cross-examination. But I will be putting together a dossier on a few people.
Fair enough.
So thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks indeed. And we'll look forward to seeing you again in 10 weeks' time for Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. Next week, we're keeping the slasher movement alive with Child's Play, the story of the demonic doll Chucky.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that will be one to look forward to.
See you next week, and thanks again for listening, and thanks again for putting up with Friday the 13th, A New Beginning.
Goodbye.